The warning. The stars stretched endlessly across the dark void of space. Everything was quiet. The vastness of the universe was so silent that it almost felt peaceful. But in the silence, a small crew aboard the SS Sentinel, a reconnaissance ship, was about to break that peace with a terrifying discovery. Lieutenant Adam Wells sat in the ship's control room, staring at the blinking lights on the radar screen. His fingers hovered over the controls, unsure whether the strange signal he had just detected was a mistake. The readings were irregular. Something was out there, something big, and it was heading straight toward Earth. He leaned closer to the monitor, his brow furrowed in confusion. "This can't be right," he muttered under his breath. He ran his hands through his short, dark hair, his nerves starting to tighten. The signal was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The ship's AI, Echo, ran a diagnostic, but it only confirmed his fears. The signal was real. Adam turned quickly to his co-pilot, Sergeant Linda Gray, who was at the communications desk. She had been working through routine checks and didn't notice the strange reading until Adam's voice broke the quiet. "Linda, you need to see this," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda's eyes widened as she read the data on her screen. "It's huge," she said, trying to hide the concern in her voice. "And it's coming fast." Adam stood, pacing in the small control room, his mind racing. A ship that big, and it's not one of ours. It's not even from a system we've mapped. The readings indicated it was a foreign craft, one that had never been seen before by any of Earth's defenses. But where did it come from? Before Linda could respond, Echo's voice filled the room, cold and mechanical. "Warning. An unknown warship is on an intercept course with Earth. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. The words echoed in Adam's ears. Warship, that was the last thing they needed. Earth had only recently recovered from a series of smaller skirmishes with alien forces. A full-scale warship, one that could potentially destroy everything in its path, was an entirely different threat. Adam's thoughts were interrupted by the loud alarm that blared through the ship's intercom system. "Alert! Alert! Enemy warship approaching." The computer announced repeatedly. The crew members on the bridge scrambled into action. The calmness that once filled the room was replaced by urgency. Linda immediately contacted Earth Command, sending a priority message. "This is the SS Sentinel reporting. We have an unidentified warship on a direct course for Earth. Please advise." Adam stood still, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was no ordinary mission. This was a warning. But what kind of warning was it? Minutes felt like hours as they waited for a response. Adam couldn't stop staring at the radar screen. The large object on their sensors was moving too fast, and they had no way of predicting its next move. Finally, the voice of Commander Sarah Mason came through the comm system. "Lieutenant Wells, Sergeant Gray, we've received your report. We're analyzing the data now. Hold position. We need to gather more intel before we make any decisions." Adam's fingers tightened around the edge of the control panel. "Understood, Commander. But we need to act fast. That ship is closing in on us. We might not have time for more analysis." There was a brief pause, and then Commander Mason replied, her voice firm but calm. "We're already mobilizing Earth's defenses, but you are our eyes out there. Stay in position and keep monitoring the ship. We'll need all the information you can provide." Adam and Linda exchanged a look. They were the first line of defense, and the weight of that responsibility sat heavily on their shoulders. They didn't have the firepower to engage a warship, but they could gather vital information. They could delay it, even if just for a little while. As the SS Sentinel drifted silently in space, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much worse. He glanced at the radar again. The warship was no longer just a distant threat. It was closing in fast, and time was running out. Suddenly, Echo's voice filled the room once more. "Warning. Human life signs detected aboard the enemy warship." The words hit Adam like a punch to the stomach. Human life signs. That was impossible. No human had ever been aboard an enemy ship. He turned to Linda, his voice shaky. Did we just hear that right? Human life. Linda quickly checked her screens. It's true. Echo's not malfunctioning. There are humans on that ship. But why? Who are they? The discovery added an unexpected layer of confusion and fear. The enemy warship was not only a threat to Earth, but it was now a mystery. Humans were aboard that ship, but what side were they on? Were they enemies, or had they been captured? The situation was rapidly becoming more dangerous, and the crew of the SS Sentinel could only wait and prepare for the unknown. Adam's hands gripped the controls once more as he stared into the vast, starry distance. The enemy was coming, and no one knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Humanity had never faced a challenge like this before. The countdown begins. The silence of space was broken only by the occasional hum of the SS Sentinel's engines as it drifted, a small speck in the vastness of the universe. But inside the ship, the crew was far from calm. Lieutenant Adam Wells stood near the radar, his fingers tapping nervously against the panel. The ship's sensors still showed the massive warship on its intercept course. Only closer now, far too close. 30 minutes. Adam muttered to himself. 30 minutes until it reaches Earth. He couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. 30 minutes. It seemed like no time at all. Earth's defenses weren't ready. The ships in orbit were far too few, and none of them were equipped to handle a warship of this size. And then there was the mystery of the humans aboard the enemy ship. What did that mean? Commander Mason's voice broke into his thoughts. Lieutenant Wells, we've got a situation on our hands. We can't just wait here. I'm sending out reinforcements. Prepare to engage the enemy with whatever data you can gather. Adam glanced at Linda, who was already making the necessary calculations to transmit their findings back to Earth Command. Her fingers flew across the keys, every move precise, though her face was taut with concern. Understood, Commander, Adam said, his voice steady despite the storm of questions and fear swirling in his mind. He knew Earth's defenses would soon be on the way, but he also knew they would arrive too late to make a real difference. They were too far out. It was up to him and his crew to buy them enough time. The warship had closed the gap significantly. On the radar, it now appeared as a massive, dark shape, with a sleek design that hinted at both power and destruction. There was something about its structure that made Adam uneasy. Its sharp edges and massive engines screamed of advanced technology, technology that Earth had never encountered before. Suddenly, Echo's voice chimed in again, more urgent this time. Warning, the enemy warship is locking onto Earth's coordinates. Weapons systems activating. Adam's heart skipped a beat. Weapons systems. The enemy was preparing to attack. He could already see the massive ship's movements on the radar. It was aligning itself for a strike. The crew of the SS Sentinel had no weapons strong enough to defend against that kind of firepower. We need to move, Adam said, his voice low. There's no way we can outrun it. But if we can't outrun it, we can at least stay ahead of it, gather data on its weapons, and keep it distracted for as long as possible. Linda nodded, already preparing a series of evasive maneuvers. She tapped into the ship's systems and launched a series of decoy signals, hoping to throw off the warship's targeting systems. The SS Sentinel rocked slightly as the decoys dispersed into space, scattering to create false targets. Adam watched the radar, hoping for a sign of success. But instead of losing the warship's signal, the enemy vessel shifted its focus, adapting immediately to the decoy. The enemy was too smart, and their technology was far too advanced. They're not fooled, Linda said, her voice tense. They're adjusting their targeting systems. We need to come up with a new plan. Adam's mind raced. What did they have left? There was no way they could win this fight, not without help. And yet, time was running out. Echo interrupted his thoughts. Human life forms detected. Location: bridge of the enemy warship. The humans appear to be in command. Adam's jaw clenched. Humans. On the enemy ship. It didn't make any sense. Were these humans turned traitors? Or were they prisoners, forced to fight for their captors? Either way, it didn't change the fact that Earth was in danger, and no matter who was in charge, the warship needed to be stopped. Suddenly, the radar blared a new alert. The warship had fired. A single, concentrated beam of energy shot through the blackness of space, its target locked on Earth's main orbital defense station. The beam was bright, almost too bright to look at, and in its wake, a deadly trail of destruction followed. Earth's defenses were not ready to take such a hit. Direct hit, Linda shouted, her voice high with alarm. The defense station is down. We've lost communication with Earth Command. Adam felt the blood drain from his face. The enemy had already crippled Earth's defenses, and the warship was now free to attack the planet. But then, as the beam faded into the stars, something changed. A new signal appeared on the radar, smaller but fast. It was Earth's reinforcements. Another ship had arrived. Adam's eyes widened. The SS Vanguard, Earth's fastest and most heavily armed ship, had made it just in time. But even with the Vanguard's arrival, Adam knew the fight was far from over. The enemy warship was huge and heavily armored, and the humans aboard had to know what they were doing. "We have a chance," Adam said to Linda, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling around him. "But we need to buy more time." Linda didn't hesitate. "Let's make it count." The SS Sentinel darted forward, using the small advantages it had. Adam gripped the controls, steering the ship with precision, even as the enemy warship loomed larger in their view. The countdown to Earth's fate was still ticking, and Adam knew this was only the beginning. The warship was still coming, and it would take everything they had to stop it. This section builds the tension and suspense further, with the human crew trying to make crucial decisions under pressure. It introduces the element of Earth's reinforcements arriving just in time, but the threat still feels very real, keeping the audience on the edge of their seat. Let me know if you'd like any more additions or adjustments. Battle preparations. The hum of the engines was the only sound aboard the SS Sentinel, but it felt louder now, like a countdown. The ship's crew had a single mission: survive long enough to gather vital data and delay the enemy warship. Earth's reinforcements, the SS Vanguard, had arrived just in time, but the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on them. The warship was massive, and their resources were limited. Adam Wells stood at the ship's helm, staring into the cold expanse of space. His mind raced, but there was no time for doubt. They had to act. There was no room for hesitation. "Lieutenant, I've rerouted all remaining power to the engines and shields," Linda Gray reported from the control panel, her fingers moving swiftly across the holographic display. "We can keep our shields up for about 20 more minutes if we keep evasive. After that, we're vulnerable." Adam nodded grimly. "That's 20 minutes we need to make count." His gaze shifted to the enemy warship on the radar. It was still gaining on them. The SS Vanguard was already engaged in battle with it, its plasma cannons lighting up the darkness of space. But the enemy warship's sheer size and firepower dwarfed their efforts. It was as if they were fighting a storm with a handful of raindrops. "How's the Vanguard holding up?" Adam asked, trying to focus on the task at hand. Linda's face tightened as she watched the data feed. "They're doing their best, but the warship's shields are stronger than expected. They're taking heavy damage, and they can't land a decisive blow." "Then it's up to us," Adam muttered. He turned to the tactical display on the wall. The SS Sentinel was a small, fast ship. They weren't built for direct combat like the Vanguard, but they had speed on their side. If they could keep the enemy distracted just long enough, Earth's forces might get a better shot at bringing down the warship. Adam's mind was racing through their options. They had one advantage that no one had accounted for yet: the data they had gathered. The enemy warship might have massive firepower, but it was far from perfect. They had already discovered a small weakness in its outer hull, a vulnerable gap where the plating had been poorly reinforced. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a well-placed strike. "We need to strike that weak point," Adam said firmly. "Linda, can you reroute the energy to the aft thrusters? We'll need all the speed we can get for this." Linda nodded without a word, already making the necessary adjustments. Aft thrusters are now at maximum output. The ship can go up to 40% faster than usual. We'll have a better chance at dodging their fire while we take the shot. Adam's heart pounded in his chest. This was a risky plan, but it was their best shot. He glanced at the tactical console. The weak point was close, but the enemy warship wasn't just going to let them get close without a fight. Already, its weapons were locking on, and he could see the targeting lines on the screen. "On my mark, Linda, prepare evasive maneuvers after the strike. We can't take another hit like that." Adam's voice was steady, but inside, he could feel the pressure building. Linda's eyes flickered to the display, then back at Adam. "Ready." Adam took a deep breath. This was it. Now. The SS Sentinel shot forward, its engines roaring with renewed power. The warship loomed larger on the radar, its weapons charging. But Adam was focused. The strike had to be perfect. He could almost feel the pulse of energy building in the enemy warship's cannons. The enemy was ready to fire, but they wouldn't hit them. Not today. The SS Sentinel dove into a sharp angle, using the speed from the aft thrusters to outmaneuver the enemy's targeting systems. The massive warship's guns fired, missing by mere inches as Adam's ship narrowly escaped. "We're in range," Adam shouted. His fingers flew across the control panel, targeting the weak point in the enemy ship's armor. The SS Sentinel fired a concentrated beam directly at the gap, watching as the energy collided with the warship's outer plating. For a split second, there was nothing. No explosion, no visible damage. But then, the warship's shields flickered, revealing the damaged section of its hull. The blast had pierced it. The SS Sentinel had hit its target. Direct hit. Linda cried out. "The shield is down in that section. The outer plating's compromised." Adam's eyes locked onto the screen. They had done it. The warship wasn't invulnerable anymore. The opening they needed was finally there, but there was no time to celebrate. The warship retaliated. A series of rapid-fire blasts streaked through space, aiming straight for them. The SS Sentinel dodged, weaving and twisting through the blasts with skill and precision, but the sheer force of the enemy fire shook the ship with each close call. "Get us out of here, Linda," Adam barked. Linda pulled the ship into a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding another blast. The SS Sentinel had never been pushed this hard before, but it held steady. Adam could feel the ship's vibrations through the control panel as they sped away from the enemy's return fire. "That was too close," Linda said, her voice shaky but determined. She quickly checked the ship's systems. Hull integrity is holding. No serious damage yet. Adam's mind was racing. They had done it, damaged the warship's defenses, but they still weren't out of danger. The enemy had shown them a small weakness, and now it was time to exploit it. But they couldn't afford to wait any longer. They had to go in again. "We have one shot at this," Adam said. "Linda, get us back in position. I'm going to hit them where it hurts." Linda gave him a determined look. "You got it, Lieutenant." With the SS Sentinel still shaking from the recent attack, Adam knew that every second mattered. Their next move would either secure humanity's future or seal their fate. The battle was far from over. First encounter. The ship groaned as it surged forward, the SS Sentinel pushing its engines to their limits. Adam Wells stood at the helm, eyes locked on the radar, as the warship's looming shape filled the screen once again. Their last attack had given them a brief moment of hope, but now, the enemy warship was recalibrating. Firing on all cylinders with renewed fury, Adam could see the targeting beams sweep across the blackness of space, locking in on their position. "Shields at 20%, Linda reported, her voice tight with tension. The stress of the battle was showing on her face, but she kept her hand steady on the control panel. "We can't keep this up much longer, Adam." He knew that. Every second felt like a countdown, a constant reminder of the pressure mounting around them. But they had no choice but to keep moving. They had to keep the enemy distracted, long enough for the SS Vanguard to make another attempt. "Get us in close," Adam said, his voice low. "We need to draw their fire and buy time. One more strike, and we take down their engines." Linda didn't respond with words, just a sharp nod as she executed the evasive maneuvers, guiding the SS Sentinel into the heart of the battlefield. They were weaving between blasts, dodging at the last possible moment, as the enemy warship unleashed wave after wave of deadly fire. The battle had shifted to a close-quarters engagement. The warship wasn't just firing long-range shots anymore. It had switched to rapid-fire cannons, sending streams of energy toward them. Adam gripped the edge of the control panel, trying to keep his focus while the air seemed to thrum with danger. "We're in range," Linda called out, her eyes locked on the weapon system. Locking on. Now. The SS Sentinel fired its pulse cannon, a brilliant beam of energy slicing through the dark void. It struck the enemy warship dead center on the weak point they had exposed earlier. This time, the hit caused the warship's shields to flicker, and Adam could see the damage. It was minor, but enough to give them a small window of opportunity. Then came the unexpected. The enemy warship's engines flared as it suddenly veered off course, pulling away from the SS Sentinel and into the dark void. The move was fast, calculated. The enemy ship was retreating. It didn't make sense. "Are they retreating?" Linda asked, her eyes wide in disbelief. She could hardly process what was happening. Adam's heart skipped a beat. "No, they're repositioning. They're setting up for something big." The SS Sentinel didn't have time to react. Before they could fully understand what was happening, the enemy warship unleashed an enormous shockwave. A pulse of energy so strong that it rocked the SS Sentinel like a ragdoll caught in a storm. The ship lurched violently, knocking Adam off his feet. "Report," he barked, struggling to get back to the control panel as the alarms blared. Linda gritted her teeth, forcing herself back into her seat. "Hull integrity at 40%. We got damage on the outer plating. Shields are gone." The battle had just escalated. The SS Sentinel had taken a hit, a direct hit, and the damage was severe. The ship was still operational, but not for long. Their weapons were offline, and their shields were failing fast. Adam's stomach tightened with the knowledge that the SS Sentinel could no longer take many more hits. If they didn't act quickly, they'd be finished. But then, as if in response to their perilous situation, a new signal appeared on the radar, a small, fast-moving object. "Another ship," Adam muttered, disbelief in his voice. At this time, "Who's coming to the rescue now?" Linda's eyes darted to the display. She widened her eyes in shock. "It's the Vanguard. And they've got backup. It's the Aegis." Adam felt a surge of relief. The Aegis was Earth's second strongest battleship, heavily armored and equipped with devastating weaponry. If they could get a direct hit, they might be able to finish the warship off once and for all. But before Adam could process their arrival, the enemy warship adjusted its course again. This time, it was no longer retreating. It was attacking with everything it had. A stream of plasma bolts erupted from the warship, cutting through the space between them and the Aegis. The Aegis wasn't fast enough to evade, and the plasma struck with catastrophic force. The ship's shields flared, but the attack was too powerful. The Aegis shuddered violently. The massive battleship groaned as one of its engines exploded, sending debris and sparks flying into the vacuum of space. For a moment, everything went still, too still. The Aegis drifted, seemingly disabled. "Don't let them get away with this," Adam shouted, gripping the console tightly. "Linda, power up the pulse cannon. We need to finish this now." Linda, despite the panic in her eyes, focused on the controls. "I'm trying. Power's too low. We need a few more seconds." Seconds. The fate of Earth, of humanity, rested on those few seconds. Adam's eyes stayed locked on the radar. The warship wasn't stopping. They had no time to waste. Then the Aegis came back online, its engines flaring back to life. It wasn't down. Not yet. The mighty battleship fired back, a shot so powerful it split the space around them with its intensity. The pulse beam shot straight through the enemy warship's weakened section. This time, it worked. The warship shuddered, its engine sputtering. The Aegis had landed the decisive blow. Direct hit. Linda screamed, her face lighting up with the realization. They're losing power. But the victory was short-lived. The warship was still alive, just barely. And then came a horrifying realization. "It's charging up. One last strike," Adam said under his breath, watching in horror as the enemy warship's core began to glow with blinding energy. It wasn't over. Not yet. The unexpected twist. The Aegis's pulse beam had pierced the enemy warship's core, sending shockwaves through space. For a moment, everything stood still. The vast emptiness of the cosmos seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the inevitable explosion. Adam Wells gripped the control panel tightly, his knuckles white. The enemy warship was shaking violently, its weapon systems offline, and its hull cracking under the pressure. But then something happened, something no one had expected. The enemy warship, in its final moments of apparent destruction, began to glow. A strange, eerie light pulsed from the wreckage, flickering like a dying star. Adam's eyes narrowed. This wasn't normal. He had seen warships take hits before, but nothing like this. "What the hell is happening?" Linda asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Adam shook his head. "I don't know, but I don't like it." Suddenly, without warning, the warship's lights flickered back to life. The core, still glowing with that unnatural energy, stabilized. It wasn't just surviving the attack, it was adapting. The warship's engines hummed back to life, and it started to regenerate. "How is that possible?" Linda whispered, her voice trembling. "It should have been destroyed." But it wasn't destroyed. The warship was rebuilding itself, as if its advanced technology had some kind of self-repair system far beyond anything humanity had seen. The blast from the Aegis had torn through its outer layers, but beneath the surface, the enemy's systems were alive. Adam's pulse quickened. They were in deeper trouble than they realized. The SS Sentinel had already pushed its systems to their limits. The Vanguard was taking heavy damage, and the Aegis was struggling to stay online after that powerful strike. Earth's reinforcements had been hit hard, and they had no idea what kind of weapon the enemy was about to unleash now. "We need to get out of here, Adam," Linda said, her eyes wide with panic. "If it's regenerating, we're not going to survive another round." Adam didn't argue. He could see the warship was preparing for something catastrophic. Its energy core was glowing brighter, and its weapon systems were coming back online. "We're not leaving yet," Adam said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "We need to figure out what's causing this. There's something we're missing." Before Linda could respond, the SS Sentinel's alarms blared again. A fresh wave of blasts came from the warship, faster and more powerful than before. The attacks were aimed at the Vanguard, which was still struggling to regain its balance after taking that first brutal hit. "Vanguard, get out of there," Adam shouted, but there was no response. The Vanguard was still trying to fight back, but it was severely weakened. The warship's regenerative abilities were pushing the battle toward a tipping point. Adam's mind raced. The regeneration wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was a weapon. The warship was evolving as they fought it, and the damage they were causing only seemed to make it more dangerous. Then, in the middle of the chaos, something even stranger happened. The enemy warship's hull opened, a massive section of its sides split apart, revealing a series of massive energy cannons hidden beneath its armor. The weapons were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. Gigantic, glowing orbs of energy that began to charge up with a low hum. Adam's heart sank. "Is that what I think it is?" Linda gasped, staring at the cannons. Adam didn't answer. The cannons were huge, and they were aimed directly at Earth. In that moment, he understood what the enemy was doing. The warship wasn't just repairing itself, it was preparing for one final devastating attack. And if that blast hit Earth, it would be over. There would be no coming back from it. "Earth Command, this is SS Sentinel," Adam said, his voice urgent. "We have a visual on the enemy warship's final weapon. It's preparing to fire. I repeat, it's preparing to fire on Earth. We need immediate backup. Now." The silence on the other end of the comms was deafening. "Vanguard, Aegis, anyone?" Adam shouted, but still there was no response. The warship's cannons were charging, and with every passing second, the energy in them grew stronger, more destructive. "We're out of time," Adam muttered, more to himself than anyone else. There was nothing left for them to do. No reinforcements, no backup, just the two remaining ships in space, struggling to survive. The enemy warship was moments away from launching its devastating attack, and in that moment, Adam knew it was a test of humanity's will to survive. Would they just give up and let the warship destroy them, or would they fight with everything they had left? Adam glanced at Linda. Her face was pale, but there was something in her eyes, a spark, a recognition that humanity wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. They had come this far, and no matter how powerful the enemy seemed, they weren't going to stop. "Linda," Adam said quietly, "we fight until the last second." With one final glance at the massive warship, Adam slammed his fist against the control panel. "Let's finish this." The ultimate sacrifice. The air in the SS Sentinel felt thick with tension, as if the very walls of the ship were holding their breath. Adam Wells stood frozen at the helm, eyes fixed on the radar. The enemy warship was charging up its final weapon, its massive cannons glowing with blinding energy, ready to launch the strike that would obliterate Earth. "There's no time left," Linda whispered, barely able to hide the panic in her voice. "If we don't do something now, Earth is gone." Adam turned toward her, his face grim. They had fought for hours, against impossible odds, but now the enemy had one final trick up its sleeve, a weapon that could annihilate everything in its path. They were running out of options, and the Vanguard and Aegis were already too damaged to help. "We still have one shot at this," Adam said, his voice cold but determined. "But it's going to take everything we have left." Linda looked at him, her face pale but resolute. "What do we do?" Adam's eyes never left the glowing warship, its cannons pulsing with deadly energy. He knew what had to be done. Their best chance at stopping this weapon was to disable the core of the warship before it could fire. The SS Sentinel wasn't built for this kind of confrontation. They didn't have the firepower to take down an enemy of this magnitude. But what they had was speed, agility, and the element of surprise. He tapped the console in front of him. "Echo, what's the status of the ship's remaining power reserves?" "Power reserves are at 12%. Lieutenant," Echo's mechanical voice responded. "Recharging is not possible under current conditions." Adam exhaled sharply. "That's not enough to make it out of here alive." Linda was silent for a moment, eyes scanning the controls. Then, slowly, her fingers moved over the panel with a new resolve. "We don't need to make it out alive," she said, almost quietly. "We just need to stop it." Adam stared at her, his heart thundering in his chest. "What are you saying, Linda?" Her eyes locked onto his, filled with a determination that was almost frightening. "If we use the last of the ship's power to launch a direct strike at the core, we can disable it. I'll override the engine lock. The SS Sentinel will self-destruct after the strike. We won't survive it, but Earth will." The silence between them was deafening. The enormity of the decision hung heavily in the air, pressing down on both of them. Adam knew she was right. The SS Sentinel was their only remaining weapon. They had no other option. The warship was too strong to defeat with any conventional attack. But if they could use their own ship as a weapon, if they could deliver one final devastating blow to the enemy's core, they might just have a chance to stop the destruction of Earth. But it would mean sacrificing themselves. "We'll never make it," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" Linda didn't hesitate. "It's the only way, Adam. We do this, or Earth falls." Adam looked back at the glowing warship, still charging its deadly weapon. The enemy was preparing to end everything, but they weren't going to let it happen. He took a deep breath. "Then we fight to the end. Together." Without another word, Linda began the procedure to initiate the self-destruct sequence. Adam moved to the weapons console, reconfiguring the SS Sentinel's remaining energy reserves into one final powerful strike. "Power surge imminent," Echo announced. "Course correction engage. Impact in T-5 minutes." Adam's heart raced, each second pulling them closer to the inevitable. He took one last look at Linda, who was steady at her station, the weight of their decision visible in her eyes. "We've got 5 minutes to make this count," Adam said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Are you ready?" Linda gave him a tight, determined smile. "I've never been more ready." As the SS Sentinel raced toward the enemy warship, the final weapon glowed brighter, its energy nearly overwhelming. The two ships were locked in an impossible dance, each one fighting for survival, and yet only one could win. Adam could feel the heat rising in his chest as they approached the enemy warship's vulnerable core. They were so close now, but the danger was overwhelming. The warship's cannons were charging up. Its final strike was moments away. "Get ready, Linda," Adam shouted, his grip tight on the control panel. "This is it." They launched the final strike, a pulse of energy that cut through the space between them. It hit the warship's core with explosive force, the ship's outer hull cracking and splintering under the pressure. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. Then came the blast, a shockwave so strong that it pushed the SS Sentinel backward, tearing at its hull. The last thing Adam saw before the darkness took over was the warship crumbling. Its final weapon rendered useless, as the pulse of energy from their strike ignited the enemy's core. In that moment, Earth was saved. The warship was destroyed, and the impending destruction was averted. But at what cost? Humanity's triumph. The explosion rocked space like a thunderclap, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The SS Sentinel was thrown backward by the force of the blast. Adam Wells' grip on the console was all that kept him from being flung across the control room. The ship's alarms blared, and the lights flickered violently as the hull creaked and groaned under the strain. Then, a deafening silence settled in. Adam's vision blurred as he struggled to maintain consciousness, his head spinning from the shockwave. He tried to shake it off, but the feeling of weightlessness made it hard to focus. "Linda," he whispered hoarsely, but there was no response. Panic surged through him as he fumbled to reach the comms panel. "Linda, respond." Slowly, he turned toward her station, his breath caught in his throat. Linda was slumped over her controls, her face pale but alive. The self-destruct sequence had taken its toll on the ship, but somehow, they were still here. A faint cough broke the silence, and Linda's eyes fluttered open. Did it work?" she asked, her voice weak but filled with hope. Adam took a shaky breath and smiled, his heart still racing. "Yeah, it worked." The SS Sentinel may have been battered, broken, and barely holding together, but the warship was gone. In the distance, the remnants of the massive enemy vessel drifted silently, a testament to the destruction it had once been capable of. Its core had exploded in a brilliant flash, leaving nothing behind but debris and the eerie emptiness of space. The threat to Earth was over. For a moment, everything felt unreal. The battle had been so intense, the stakes so high, that the silence in the aftermath was almost deafening. "Adam," Linda said softly, her voice laced with disbelief. "Did we really just win?" Adam exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "We did. Earth is safe." But as the words left his mouth, he couldn't shake the feeling of loss. The SS Sentinel was barely holding together. The ship's engines were offline, and their communication systems were down. They had no way to reach Earth Command. The sacrifice had been monumental, but it had worked. The enemy was defeated, and humanity had survived. A crackling sound broke through the silence, and the faintest signal came through on the comms. The static cleared just enough for a voice to emerge. "SS Sentinel, do you copy?" It was a voice Adam recognized instantly. Commander Sarah Mason of Earth Command. "Commander," Adam shouted, his voice cracking with relief. "We did it. The enemy warship is destroyed. Earth is safe." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, Commander Mason's voice came through, sounding both relieved and weary. "We received your transmission. Earth's defenses are reporting no further threats. We have confirmation of the destruction of the enemy warship. You did it. You saved us." Adam's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. But at what cost? He murmured to himself, glancing over at Linda. She caught his eye and gave him a weary smile. "We're not done yet," Adam said aloud. "We need to get back to Earth. We need to let everyone know what happened. The world needs to know what we did." The SS Sentinel was no longer the sleek, powerful ship it had once been. Its hull was torn, its systems barely functioning, and its crew was exhausted. But they had accomplished the impossible. They had stopped a warship that seemed invincible, and they had saved humanity from the brink of destruction. As the last of the ship's energy reserves flickered out, Adam reached over and activated the emergency beacon. They might not have the strength to make it back on their own, but Earth was already coming to retrieve them. The beacon would guide them home. "We're going home, Linda," Adam said quietly. Linda nodded, her expression soft but resolute. "It's over now, Adam. We did what we had to do." The two of them sat there in silence, their minds still processing what they had just accomplished. They had faced down a force so powerful that the thought of survival seemed impossible, but they had survived. Together, they had turned the tide. And in the end, humanity's resilience and courage had been enough to win the day. Outside the shattered windows of the SS Sentinel, Earth's blue orb gleamed softly against the backdrop of stars. The planet they had fought so hard to protect was still there. And for now, it was safe. But Adam and Linda both knew that peace was fragile. The galaxy was vast, and the future remained uncertain. They had won this battle, but there would be more to come. Humanity had proven its strength, but the fight for survival was never truly over. "Let's go home," Adam said again, his voice steady. The battle had been won, but the war, for humanity's survival, was just beginning.